I suspect that he has been slightly shocked at seeing quite what's happened to Ukraine in the days since that intelligence sharing was suspended. And I mean, he's acknowledged that by saying that Ukraine is getting a pounding and indeed raised the potential of sanctions on Russia.
Let's go to Catherine Philp, the World Affairs editor at The Times. She is covering Ukraine's President Zelensky's visit to meet Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince. This meeting comes ahead of the bilateral talks between Kyiv and Washington due tomorrow. So, Catherine, no Russian involvement at all in this meeting today?
That's correct, no. The Russians have shown no interest in meeting Zelensky directly at the moment. So his presence there is really to set up the meeting tomorrow and to have someone there at head of state level to meet with the Saudi Crown Prince, which is really an acknowledgement of the Saudi role in hosting these talks and hopefully playing a helpful role.
Yeah, I mean, some people do find that one of the more confusing aspects of this, that Saudi Arabia, once a complete pariah state, is now in a position to bring about peace between Ukraine and Russia. How has this happened?
Well, we might say the same about a lot of the scrambling of the world order in the last few weeks. So, I mean, this one actually has been rather longer in the making, I think, than the wholesale reordering of the post-World War order, which we're also seeing. They are, as far as we can see within this conflict, perhaps more neutral and better placed than many other parties. So it's as good a place as any to hold them.
So what will President Zelensky be hoping to get out of these initial conversations with the Crown Prince?
I mean, I think it's very difficult for him to get anything concrete because Saudi Arabia hasn't played that kind of role yet. So I think that we need to see his presence there as sort of symbolic in shepherding the other talks that are happening at a lower level, at the foreign minister level. He may indeed, certainly Washington would hope that he will be signing the minerals agreement that was the cause of so much discord when he visited the Oval Office. So that we could see that happen. There may potentially be some sort of backroom meetings that are separate to the official track tomorrow. But I think that really this is Zelensky putting himself back into these negotiations after such an abrupt end in Washington the other week. And we know that he's been taking some advice from Jonathan Pole, the British National Security Advisor, who is himself a veteran of the peace process in Northern Ireland. So has some experience of handling this kind of negotiation.
But to many of us, Catherine, it still seems as though Ukraine is being asked to make concessions, to apologise, and still no demands are being made on Russia. It's just bizarre.
It is bizarre. Yes, to apologise, to sort of get in line, to sign this, deleterious minerals agreement, which is perhaps less punitive than it first appeared. It has changed slightly since its first incarnation. So, but yes, nothing has been asked of Russia yet. And that remains a curious place for these negotiations to be, because obviously there's really nothing to negotiate. I mean, Russia hasn't been asked to negotiate at all as yet. And so, and Ukraine will not be present at any of those negotiations. Those will be bilateral. So I think this is another opportunity for Ukraine to try and steer what happens next, as they won't have that face-to-face opportunity with Russia. They're really going to have to make a convincing case to the Americans about what they should then ask of the Russians. And so that is why we're expecting tomorrow them to bring this proposal to the table, which would sketch out an aerial ceasefire and a naval ceasefire at sea as potential starting points.
And just a quick word on intelligence sharing with Ukraine. I have to say, I was trying to make sense of a fairly impenetrable word soup from President Trump about the status of intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Are they getting information or are they not? Has it been reinstated?
No, it hasn't. I mean, I think, we're used to these word soups from Trump. I suspect that he, given that he said he wants to stop the killing in Ukraine and that's his main motivation, I suspect that he has been slightly shocked at seeing quite what's happened to Ukraine in the days since that intelligence sharing was suspended. And I mean, he's acknowledged that by saying that Ukraine is getting a pounding and indeed raised the potential of sanctions on Russia. So he has in some sense responded to that. I think when he says it's just about restored, it is that nothing has happened yet, but that he's perhaps holding out. He's holding that out as bait to the Ukrainians and suggesting that it could be restored if they do his bidding.
Right. Thank you, as ever, much appreciated. Catherine Philp, World Affairs Editor at The Times.
In a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
This negotiation has been enforced, or forced rather, and imposed, and it hasn't necessarily been on Ukraine's terms. So I think that they are playing a waiting game to see if the situation will relent somewhat, the pressure will relent somewhat, the conditions are better for entering into negotiations, rather than rushing into it simply because on the whim of the US president.
You haven't been alone. You haven't been alone. We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about West?
If you didn't have our military equipment, if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yeah.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
The Americans, or for the Americans, a bad deal is better than no deal. But for the Ukrainians, a bad deal is worse than no deal. And that is a fundamental tension between the two. So there will need to be some form of impasse break in order to move this forward. President Zelensky can't sell out his country for personal and patriotic reasons, even if he's willing to cede power in order to get some form of compromise from the Americans. That would work, but it's not yet working for the Americans, who are doubling down on the restrictions they're placing on the Ukrainians, of course.